Welcome back to another episode of We Don't Know What to Watch, the podcast where two guys talk about random movies that they were assigned to thanks to the almighty algorithm. And with me today is the amazing, the incredible, the Bilbo Baggins to my Frodo Baggins, Kyle Mulford. How you doing, Kyle?
Today's podcast was brought to you by the Fiery Pits of Mordor because we are one podcast to rule them all.
Yes.
I'm doing good after my adventure through Middleearth.
So I suppose we have to what do you think we're going to be talking about today, Kyle?
We're going to be talking about that old cartoon Hobbit movie.
Yes, Ralph Bakshi's Hobbit?
Yes, Ralph Bakshi's Hobbit. No, the first of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Fellowship of the Ring from 2001. Yes.
Happy 20th anniversary.
That is true. I didn't even put that together. Yeah, this is we're releasing this on it'll be a few months before its 20th anniversary. Came out in December, and let's talk about that. This came out I think it was like December 19th, 2001. It was like the day before my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this. I don't know what your history with Lord of the Rings is. I am a nerd who has never read these books.
For shame.
Yeah, and I need to remedy that sometime. But being a nerd, I knew about Lord of the Rings, obviously. I mean, you don't even have to be a nerd to know about Lord of the Rings.
If you played D&D, you probably knew about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And so when this movie was coming out, the trailers looked cool. And I was like, oh, Peter Jackson is doing this. I was like, I love the Frighteners and Dead Alive, but Peter Jackson is doing Lord of the Rings. What is this? Like
the Meet the Feebles guy?
Yeah, and I didn't know Meet the Feebles at the time. I knew him as the Dead Alive guy and the director of Frighteners. Those are the movies I had seen. And it was just like, can this be good? Like, can he do like a giant epic movie like this? And I remember watching this in the theater and I was blown away. Like, just absolutely blown away by this movie. To give away whether I recommend this at the end of the podcast. I couldn't wait for the next one to come out the next year.
Well, because there is a bit of an age gap between us.
I was in my early 20s.
In 2001, I was about, 7. So I had no idea what these were until they were like already done. Because I just wasn't paying attention. I just remember watching the Oscars one year, and it seemed like the Return of the King won everything that year.
Yeah, can we talk about that too, since you bring it up?
Because I wasn't able to see them, obviously, because I was too young for them.
This was one of those where Return of the King won everything because the first two movies didn't. The first movie was nominated for 13 awards. The ones it was nominated for but didn't win was Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Ian McKellen, who's great, Best Director, Best Writing for Adapted Work, Best Art Direction / Set Decoration, Best Costume Design, Best Editing, Best Music for Original Song, and Best Sound. And then the 4 that it won was Best Cinematography, Best Makeup, Best Music Original Score, and Best Effects Visual Effects. So it still won 4 out of 13 nominations, but then it was like, people were like, the first two movies should have won all the awards. So then they just gave all the awards to Return of the King.
Yeah, deservedly so.
And I think that's one of those that everybody was okay with Return of the King just winning for like all 3 of the movies and going, yes, it's taking the awards just because, I mean, most people know this by now, but he filmed all 3 of these movies at the same time.
Yeah, cast as one kind of big mega production.
And I think that was a really genius move for something like this. And I think what worked about this is that a lot of people are fans of Lord of the Rings, but Peter Jackson, I think that he's read it several times and he, watching some interviews with him, he said, as a kid, he was like, I think this would make a great live action movie and I can't wait for someone to make it so I can see it up on the big screen. Nice. So I think that's like a kid with a candy jar there. Like, just this was a passion project for him, even so much so that he wanted to get the look of this thing so right that people had been, so the books came out like what, the 60s, 50s or 60s.
50s, 60s, 50s in the UK, and then they kind of got big, at least in the US, when they came out in paperback in the 60s.
Yeah, and since then, people have been doing artwork for like just depicting Middle Earth. And there's two that are really well renowned, I guess. And I don't remember their names, but he went and looked at all of their pictures and he hunted those guys down. One was like almost like a recluse. He was a very private person. And like he hunted both of these guys down and said, "Do you want to work on this movie?" and and one of them was funny because he was retelling the story like, "Oh yeah, this guy, I was on the phone going, I'm Peter Jackson and I've done these movies and we really want to do this and we want to do it the right way and you do great artwork for this and blah blah," and like going through this whole spiel. And then you see like the other half that the other interview with the actual artist. He's like, and Peter Jackson's like, "I was really nervous asking him because I wanted him to work on it." And then the other guy's like, "Yeah, I was just on the phone waiting for him to stop talking so I could say yes."
Nice.
So they ended up working on the movie and using a lot of their art and then making new art for it and expanding on stuff they had already drawn. So it was kind of cool. There was one picture that they drew of that tall black tower that Saruman is in.
Mm-hmm.
And they only drew half of it. And Peter Jackson was like, "This picture, I want to see what the top of this looks like." So he had the guy who did that picture draw the rest of the tower.
Nice.
So that he could use that for the movie. So that's just some of the, behind the scenes. There's so much out there on the behind the scenes of this stuff with,
and we're lucky to have it.
Yeah. And we are, because this was a huge undertaking. This is a trilogy that I don't think anyone could ever remake these movies and have the magic that these movies have.
Yeah, they're of the moment. They were made at just the right time with just the right mix of special effects and just the right people. I'd have to give it to like Peter Jackson. I forget the name of his co-writers on this, but like, how did they know exactly what to keep and what to cut? Because it's a massive story, and it's almost like they just knew somehow we're working under like this magic spell where they knew exactly what to keep, exactly what to cut to make these movies filmable, because for a long time it was considered unfilmable.
Yeah, well, and part of that is that this is one of those book series that even though it's 3 books and they're like 1,000 pages a piece, this is a book series. There's a lot of hardcore fans that read this series like every year. And I think a lot of those people worked on this movie. Like one of the people that helped with the script reads the series every year. Like, so it's like they know these books inside and out and know what to keep in, what to take out, and which character, because they really said, he said that, there's a couple of characters where people were like, why aren't they in there? And it's like, they made the focus Frodo. And if there's a character that didn't advance Frodo's plot, they just cut the character. Yeah. So that was part of what they did. Because if you watch the whole trilogy, and we'll talk about, I know we watched the first one, but you can't talk.
It's hard to talk about one without the other two.
Yeah. So the whole movie is, everything that happens in it is progressing Frodo's storyline in some shape or another. And so should we get into like, everybody knows the story of the Fellowship of the Rings, but how about like a 30-second recap of the story?
Okay, so in a fantasy world called Middle-earth, there was once upon a time, there was this evil bad guy named Sauron with his evil army who almost took over all the kingdoms. So there's like the kingdom of men, the kingdom of elves, the kingdom of dwarves, and yada yada. So he almost took over till at the very end, the good guys were able to win because he had this magic ring that could basically, like, I guess, center all of his power.
Well, Sauron had that ring, and then the human king cut it off his finger.
Human King cuts it off his finger, and then instead of destroying the ring once and for all, they made the fatal flaw of just he wanted to keep it.
Yeah, and then 2,000 years later, Gollum had it, and that's the Hobbit story, or part of the Hobbit story. And then eventually it went to Bilbo Baggins, which is what happens in the Hobbit. And then you come to the Fellowship of the Ring, where they're like, no, we need to destroy this ring, and it
Like,
gets in the
hey, we
hands.
should probably deal with this now.
We really should deal with this. Sauron is not really alive, but he's not dead either. But the ring could bring him back to power. A once good wizard, Saruman, who was a friend of Gandalf, now works for Sauron. And this is the beginning of Frodo and his journey to destroy the ring, because it can only be destroyed in Mordor. But
In
as
the
we all
fires
know,
of Mount Doom, which is the most greatest name for a mountain ever. Sorry, Mount Everest. Mount Doom is the best.
but as we all know, one does not simply walk into Mordor.
I went, hey! It's like the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme. Ooh, ooh. That's me.
So and you get a gathering of all these people that help. And this movie has got like a lot of themes. The source material is really rich. J.R.R. Tolkien like took language classes and stuff like that. He was an immigrant over here in America. He took some, I think he lost both of his parents by the time he was fairly young. He took language classes, and then he started developing, and then he went and fought in the war in World War II.
World War One.
World War One. Was it World War One? Okay.
Yeah.
And he, like, while he was in the trenches, when there was downtime, he would scratch notes about this Middle-earth place. And those,
make
I think,
languages for it.
yeah, and I think
nerd.
some of those notes would end up in his book that he didn't quite finish, but was released posthumously, the
Silmarillion.
Yeah, I couldn't remember what it was called.
Which is basically the history textbook of Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth. So originally, The Hobbit was made in like the 1930s as like a bedtime story for his children.
Yeah.
And then like 20 years later, it's like, hey, maybe we should make a sequel. And then you can read like essays by him and like speeches by him where he's talking about working on it. And then like he was friends with C.S. Lewis, the Narnia guy, and he's kind of like making fun of him. I was like, oh, why haven't you released your one book yet? I've already released like 3.
Yeah. Well, they know his one book is
was then split into 3 books.
Yeah, and from what I've heard of it too, is he already had so much of the history of this Middle Earth in his head that like he didn't go in with an idea writing this book. He just started writing, which is insane to me because this is like the definitive fantasy book.
Yeah, not necessarily definitive, but it's a cornerstone of modern fantasy fiction.
Yeah, for
everything comes to be everything that came after it seems like a reaction to it or rips it off, or at least in some everything is a reaction to it in some way, shape, or form.
Well, because my question is I don't know like the history of fantasy. Was there a lot before that dealt with like elves, dwarves, all that stuff?
Yeah, they go back to these old folk stories that we had, Brothers Grimm and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So these other stuff was around, and not necessarily quite as stuff. I mean, like Conan the Barbarian was around, and he was probably had some influence.
But it seems like it almost he solidifies like the stereotypes of these races.
Yeah, he takes a bit from here, takes some stuff from like Norse mythology, some stuff from other mythology, some stuff from Beowulf, here and there.
Because that's one of the things that I liked about the movie is they really got like everything down to the details of the costuming, the weapons, the environment and the housing and all that stuff of the different things. The hobbits, they live in the Shire, like the way that they're built, the homes are built into the mounds. It's sunny. People are like, it's a comfort kind of place. It's very comforting, very welcoming, very happy. And then you have dwarf architecture when like they go into the mines of Moria and it's all just squared off architecture, very large because dwarves are short, but like they try and make up for it in robustness and like braggadocio. And it's just like, we got to make everything big and loud and but like very solid and rigid. So it's like all like this square patterns and stuff like that. And then you have the elves, which have been around for 1,000 years, and they're just ones that that they're just going towards an end, but they're going to fight like the whole time. But they're also very graceful. They're very like, and their architecture is very kind of fluid
Mm-hmm.
and so like I love that no matter where you are in the movie, looking at the surroundings and the clothing stuff, you know who it belongs to and where it belongs.
Yeah, definitely. It's I art. Yeah, the costuming and the production design and the makeup is what sells this movie more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because that really creates the iconic look. You could have mountains, you can have forests, but the costuming, the production design is what really brings that fantasy to life. It's, that Hobbit hole doesn't feel real until you actually get to see them go inside it. The textures and the fabrics and the armors and everything and the swords, like
And
it's insane.
and the extent that they went to get like the size difference too with the hobbits and Gandalf's around them. I think they had like two different hobbit homes, one where you know Gandalf will look really tall in it to film those scenes or whatever, and just the different ways they built them and all this stuff to um make the size changes. And then like wide shots, they had little people and children replacing the hobbits, so they all had their own little stunt doubles, which were actually more like body doubles to show their size when they're doing wide shots of
Hmm.
everybody, and that had like the real actors like face plastered on them. So they went to a lot of extents to get. I think Peter Jackson went to every length to get this right. The Shire, they found a place that was hilly, and they're like, yes, this is a perfect place. They started building the Shire a year and a half before they started filming.
Hmm.
And because they wanted to get things, trees planted, brush, bushes, and have that growing for a year so that it looked all natural in there and looked right. And it's just like that's what they did for this movie. Like I didn't get into all of it, but like I'd like to know how far in advance they did. I think the script was started to be worked on in like the mid 90s, mid to late 90s.
Yeah, and who knows how much you're working on this just in your head, just for fun, before it
Yeah.
actually starts.
And apparently, how you said like they didn't know, how do you know what to cut and all this stuff? Apparently, as they went along, like the script was getting revised through the entire shoot.
I mean, that makes fair. Yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah, so but to make that all flow through three movies and all make sense, because the continuity in these three movies is pretty great.
Yeah, this is a film trilogy that shouldn't work, but it seems like a situation that's it's a miracle where they made every right decision, and that's incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, and I guess that they had the cast, like they handpicked this cast through like casting calls and all this stuff. They really like, I think Peter Jackson was part of the process for like the whole thing. Like they're like, no, we've gone through these and we want these specific actors. And they got the hobbits together early, and so that they started filming their scenes so that like they had that camaraderie that the hobbits should have. The only thing that's funny is who they I don't know who they originally cast for Aragorn, but they had everyone that they cast in every other role ended up in the movie. That they really took care to get this cast. And then they decided that the person that they cast for Aragorn was too young. So they last minute, I think like within a week or a few days of starting to shoot, they called up Viggo Mortensen and they gave him like half a day to decide whether he wanted to be in this movie. And he didn't know anything about Lord of the Rings. And so his son was like, yeah, I love Lord of the Rings. Go do this. But anyway, so he was cast last minute. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's one of the best in this movie. And this is probably also, if you count the whole trilogy, this is Viggo Mortensen's best performance of his career. I absolutely love Viggo Mortensen in this movie.
Hmm.
He, yeah, and I guess we could go into kind of some of the cast is like they all did a great job.
Hmm.
The the hobbits all were very playful, but they were also like, kind of scared to go on this journey, but then had like this forced courage. Then you had John Rhys-Davies, who was great as Gimli,
Mm-hmm.
and just had this brashness to him that was great.
Yeah,
And
it
then,
was always like whenever he decided something, he's like he's in it 100%.
yes,
No matter consequences be damned. It's like, all right, I'm in, and when he's in, he's in.
it sounds like he was fun to work with on the set. They're like, a lot of the people had like all this stunt choreography like done for them, and like they had to learn the choreography, and they're like, John Rhys-Davies would just go, you guys, who's attacking me first? And someone would be like, I am. Come at me, I'm gonna hit you. Who's next? Come at me, I'm gonna hit you. And then they're like, and then that's what happened, and he just went crazy on him. All these
Nice.
giant people like coming, they're playing the orcs or whatever, coming at him, and they're like, oh no, he's like right into him. Yeah, I liked I liked their choice of characters. Like they really did. Like Orlando Bloom, this was like only his like second feature film.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got some theater trained actors like Ian McKellen and Hugo Weaving,
And then somehow they got Christopher Lee.
and he was one of them that watching interviews, he said that he's also one that reads the whole series like every year, and like I think he was ecstatic to even be a part of this.
Yeah, because he was the only cast member who actually got to meet Tolkien back when Tolkien was alive before he died in the 70s. So
Yeah. So yeah, he was a huge fan and actually met Tolkien. So I think that's
and he
kind of
was
cool.
like Tolkien's pick to play Gandalf at the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I think that would have been cool, but
He would have been,
but I think he does such a great job as
Mhm.
Saruman that it was
He
a
does
good
great.
casting.
Mm-hmm. He's got such power just in his voice.
He does, and I guess that he did multiple takes for everything because he's like Peter Jackson wanted to get like, no, say this way, say this way. It's like he's like we'd get to like 11 or 12 takes, and he's like, oh, I've never done this, this many takes before. He goes, and that's not saying like I'm the greatest. Like movies I've worked on, we didn't have time to do that many takes.
Like a lot of the Dracula movies, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like we get one take, it's a but yeah, he's such a, it's funny, you have like Ian McKellen and then you have Christopher Lee, who's in like all these Hammer horror films, and like this hodgepodge cast, but I don't know if any role could have been cast any better.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. It would be hard to recast this.
Definitely. And yeah, I think this is important to say, but these movies are great. We love them. But the biggest criticism, I think, is, and still even then, even from the books, the biggest criticism is like the women don't have a lot to do.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a flaw that goes back to the books.
But unfortunately, that's, and I don't like to use it. Oh, that was the times when he wrote these. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been less, they don't have anything to do, and more, we're just totally misogynistic. No, it was just they didn't give them much to do. It did,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't like some movies and shows from back in the day where it's like, oh no, they were like treated like shit as well as not having much to
Mm-hmm.
do. No, actually, the women in this were really cool when they did have stuff to do.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the characters are really cool. But yeah, there really wasn't, because yeah, you get Liv Tyler coming in, and even with shooting, they were like, yeah, we felt bad for Liv because we all had a camaraderie, but like her role was so small that she would just fly in every so often to do a couple days of shooting and then fly out again.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas everyone else was like, we all lived in like the same town for like 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then Kate Blanchett came in and her role was fairly small too, but I think she had an important role and a cool role.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was small. And I think, it'd be good to talk about some of the themes of this movie. Apparently, they said that J.R.R. Tolkien hated allegory.
Yep.
So like
he
nothing
specifically hates allegory.
Here's my thing though, is he hates allegory, but there's a lot about like he, like they were talking about like some of the stuff they talked about his thoughts and everything like that. He's like, the worst invention in the history of man was the diesel engine or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you have like this, like industrial revolution, and then you have him putting in this movie, okay, everything's all nature, all the good guys are all natural. They build their houses into the trees and into the hills. And then what are the bad guys? They're tearing down trees to make more bad guys. I'm like, I mean, if that's not a little bit allegorical, like, I mean, and maybe it's not supposed to be direct allegory because it's like he wants you to interpret your own way, but like there is an interpretation because also he went to war and it's like, yeah, we have all of these races coming together to fight the bad guy. Who's the bad guy? One leader who wants one ring to rule them all, and then this master race of orcs here. It's like
Mm-hmm.
there is you can't help finding some correlation there.
Yeah, you definitely can't help it because it is coming from, everything, all literature, all art is sort of a reaction to its time and place. So
Yeah. But I found that I was like, there is some stuff in there, and I think that it can, but it's very timeless things where it's like, the destroying things to build
mm-hmm.
versus like using nature to build, like trying to be more environmental. Like we can use it in today's day and age where it's like, we're trying to be more environmental, like recycling things
Maybe
and
not drilling into the ocean and spilling a bunch of oil.
yeah, exactly.
Just throwing it out there.
But then there's also this running theme with the ring that they're all holding. It's this ring of absolute power, and it shows like it exemplifies when someone carries it. It brings out the bad side of them, the that draw to power, where it's
Kind of
like power.
amplifies their worst qualities.
Yeah, and it's about how power corrupts you,
Mm-hmm.
and because this ring represents absolute power, and people who get their hands on it eventually get corrupted by that power. So, and that I find that's another theme throughout this whole trilogy, is that corruption of power, but by having someone have all the power, whereas like the fellowship is, Frodo wouldn't make this journey if he didn't have the help of everyone around him.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have all the power. He's not like the hero. Like he is the hero, but like he's not that guy who can do it all.
He's
He
not an
need
action hero. He's just a guy.
he's just a
He's
guy,
like he's a
and
hobbit. He's like 4 feet tall. Grew up on a farm.
he would have been dead 10 times over if it wasn't for Samwise, if it wasn't for Aragorn, if it wasn't for all these people around him to help him
Mm-hmm.
complete this task. So it's about how you need to have the people around you to get you through things.
Mm-hmm.
Things will be better if you rely on each other and have that like camaraderie and all that. So there's a lot of great themes to this, which really makes it work, and it's very like I said, it's very timeless. It's like it doesn't age. The themes don't.
Yeah, and what's also nice is that since the author's been dead for over like 40 years now, he can't say anything terrible on Twitter.
Right.
Yeah. That's nice.
So yeah, yeah, Twitter is gonna be the downfall of a lot of people, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because
Not to
we
be
don't.
confused with other fantasy movie franchises that started around the year 2001.
I know, right? It's so sad. It's like, oh, why did you go and say that stuff?
I thought you were one of the good ones.
Never mind. Don't take my money anymore.
Mm-hmm. You can have your wand back.
Oh, I still want to go to Harry Potter World though.
I had a good time when I went, and I'm sure it's a great time.
We will be going in February if the country doesn't shut down again.
Again, yeah.
So, I don't know if there's. I mean, we've kind of talked about the characters, the locations, the themes of this, and the story itself, like we said, is simple. They need to go destroy a ring.
Yep. And I don't care if, then don't be one of those jerks who thinks, well, they should have just taken the Eagles the whole time. It's like, well, then you wouldn't have a story.
Yeah, yeah. And for the longest time, just because I was like one of those sort of like I did question. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe he can only whisper into that moth's ear like once every 10 years. I don't know.
But also, like, it doesn't really matter.
No.
Then you wouldn't be the when the movie wouldn't think,
Well, but the other thing is if you notice when they're going into Mordor in the third movie, they have to hide the whole time. If they went in on those eagles, I think they even mentioned that in the third movie. If they went in on the eagles, then they'd spot them and shoot them down.
yeah, pretty much. They've got their ring wraiths and crap.
Yeah, right. So, oh, we should also mention that the HBO Max is what we watch this on because we do streaming movies. That's what we do here. And HBO Max actually has the theatrical and the extended version. Which one did you watch?
I ended up watching the theatrical because I didn't have the time.
Okay. The nice thing about the cool thing about the extended is that they really went in and made sure that everything they put in was going to help the movie, and Howard Shore even came back with his score and redid portions of the score to make it fit all the extended scenes, because almost every scene has a little bit of extension to it
Mm-hmm.
in the extended version. So I think that's cool that even Howard Shore came back, and can we talk about this? Has got to be one of his most epic scores.
Yeah, I don't know how he pulled it off, but this was like everything felt right. Another one of those million little decisions that worked extremely well.
Because he's done a million movies, and he's done a lot of movies that I like, and I couldn't hum a bar of any of his scores, but I know that he's done a lot of great scores, but like this one, everyone knows a dun
Those
dun
big horns come in and the whole orchestra, and it's just
yeah,
and also the use of like the trombones and the drums for the orcs and even stuff for the Shire. It's just like and the elves and the ring wraith song.
It really brings you into the world even more. The score is just as important as in this as the production design.
Absolutely, that's kind of those two those all that meshes together into what really feels like a miracle of a movie. Could you imagine what would it be like if like this movie failed?
Yeah,
We probably wouldn't have the other two, and most certainly wouldn't have like Game of Thrones or any other sort of big fantasy series or fantasy movies afterwards.
Yeah, this really paved the way for a lot of stuff, and
it was a big risk, and somehow it pulled off.
It really did. Well, and I mean, like I mentioned before, the original score was an Oscar winner, so that was one of the actual winners was the score. But yeah, it just everything about this movie works. And why I asked if you watched the extended was I saw the theatrical version of all three movies in the theater when they came out.
Nerd.
In their 3, consecutive years. And since those theatrical viewings, I've never watched anything other than the extended cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling my wife just today, actually, I said, I rewatched this for the podcast this week. And I was like, I even rewatched the entire trilogy just a few weeks ago because I didn't know we were going to end up doing this movie. So it was just on a whim that I watched them. But then I watched it again this week and I said, I watched the extended cut again because it's so good that I don't care that it's 4 hours long. Like I do cut it into 2 nights, but it's only because I watch movies so late. I could sit and watch this 4-hour movie and not get bored, not like I'm just enthralled the whole time. And that's the same for all 3 of them. They did such a wonderful job with the extended cuts. I actually would prefer to watch the longer version of this. They're so good.
Nice.
But that's my recommendation. If anybody goes to watch this, is watch the extended cut. It's everything works and probably works better in the extended cut. But anyway, do you recommend?
Of course, still works 20 years later.
It does. Effects hold up. Like he had the great blend of practical with digital. Like the stuff from the 90s to the 2000s, a lot of people went full digital and it was a mistake.
Are you saying the Scorpion King doesn't hold up?
Exactly.
But it has The Rock.
The people like this that build these cool sets and then they kind of amplify it with digital.
Use a good mix
those
of both. Definitely works.
those hold up. Like The Matrix still holds up.
Hmm.
But yeah, everything holds up about this whole trilogy. So I highly recommend this movie. And going into our next segment of what do you recommend with this movie, I'm going to go with the easy answer and say watch the whole trilogy. Take a
Hmm.
weekend to watch all 3 extended versions if you haven't seen them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the extended versions are great. I mean, I haven't seen them, but I know that they're great from whatever all I've heard. However, I do think that naturally Hollywood learned the worst lesson from this, and then that gave us things like eventually stuff like the Snyder Cut, which is just because now it seems like they want to have an extended version of every movie. They're even talking about having like an extended version of this upcoming Dune movie. Who, we don't know. It could be terrible.
Well,
It's like.
I know you hated the Snyder cut and you hated the original cut of Justice. Well, actually, you didn't see the original cut of Justice League.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, but the Snyder cut, even though it's got its flaws, 10 times better than the theatrical cut.
Yeah, but I'm saying that like I don't think every movie needs like a director's cut. Those rarely work. I don't know. I think my favorite version of a bad director's cut is like when it's like for the movie The Warriors. The director's cut for that where there's like the difference is so minor, like you have to go to a website to see like what exactly frame at this time signature. This frame is slightly different. This shot is slightly different. This transition is slightly different. It's like the director's cut is like there's like a 72-second difference between the theatrical and director's cut.
Didn't they just add like the comic book styling to it?
Some of it, like they
Some of
added a
it.
few things. It's there's barely a difference.
Yeah. But then there are some that are like, yeah, if it's like a director who's got like a vision, I
Mm-hmm.
like most of James Cameron's director's cuts
Mm-hmm.
over the theatrical versions. So there is a call for it for certain things, but yeah, I agree with you that like if you do it for one, they go, "Oh, we should do this for everything." It's like, no, you should do it for the people who had a real vision that you cut down their movie too much.
Mm-hmm. But then sometimes your vision is bad.
Yeah, it also depends on the director. I agree.
Yeah.
So this is one, even if it started a bad trend, I am grateful that we have the extended versions of these movies to watch.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait for the extended cut of like I don't know something stupid. The extended cut of The Room.
The
More of
extent
Tommy Wiseau wandering around with like a framed wall of spoons or whatever.
the extended cut of the extended director's cut of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I want more adventure in there. The Burton cut.
Yep.
So what is your double feature? Mine was a triple
Um,
feature.
I'm sticking with Peter Jackson. I'm gonna go back to Dead Alive, just to see how wildly different it is stylistically.
Yeah, like I said, being in my early 20s and then going to see this in the theater, it was like, the Dead Alive guy did this? What?
Yeah. But there is some of the same techniques and almost a little bit of like his little bit of horror filmmaking, kind of frenetic, fast-paced filmmaking at
Yeah.
certain points, like with the encounter with like the weird octopus monster in the lake before the Mines of Moria and stuff.
Yeah. And I took notes on this movie, and there's probably a lot of scenes that we forgot to mention, like "You Shall Not Pass," but but yeah, I think we covered a lot of the big bases on this, and
You
I think we
know,
can.
we're not making any definitive statement about anything. There's so
Nope.
much. There's a lot smarter people who have talked about this movie.
Yeah, but I like talking about it because it's such a cool movie. We can
Hmm.
move on to though what we're gonna watch next time.
We gotta spin the wheel, and if it's the Two Towers, I'm gonna flip.
That'd be awesome.
It's
I
like,
would.
well, here we go.
I'd totally do it. All right, 70 or better, spin it. Um, you don't have Apple TV, do you?
I do not.
I'm gonna respin this one,
Okay.
which is funny. There's only like 3 movies on Apple TV. this this one could be. All right.
Now I'm worried. You're giggling. I'm worried.
Oh, Rey develops her newly discovered abilities with the guidance of Luke Skywalker, who is unsettled by the strength of her powers. Meanwhile, the Resistance prepares to do battle with the First Order.
No. Well, maybe we'll get a bunch of comments on the video.
Hey guys, it's going to be two white nerds talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi.
I just don't even want to do it now. But yeah, we'll do it. We'll talk about it. Oh dear Lord. I hope people still aren't mad about this movie. They probably are, but those people are lame.
All right. You know what? I'm okay with rewatching this one.
Mm-hmm.
Take that, internet.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, actually, before we go, you can find us on the interwebs at Twitter. I'm at AwesomeKM.
And I'm at Noah_Saturn. That is spelled Satern.
We're on Instagram at We Don't Know What to Watch. Email us, we don't know what to watch at gmail.com. And until next time,
I'm a Star Wars.
my precious.